Shivāya. Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya. Om Namah Parvati Pataye Hara Hara Mahadev. Shambho Shankara Uma Maheshwar Gauri Priya Sada Śivā Gangadaram Rishikeshwaram Aumkaram Vaheguru. Shambho Shankara Uma Maheshwar Gauri Priya Sada Śivā. Tillai varum natarājane namo namah namo namah namo namah. Cidambaramō namo namah cidambaramō namo namah cidambaramō namo namah. āDum cidambaramō in béhāg rāgam āditalam by gopālakrśña bhārati. āDum cidambaramō, being a short kriti, is usually sung along with a viruttam, that is, a form of spontaneous improvisation, for which today VasanthiMā has chosen a powerful mantra invoking our own nothingness, which is said to be equivalent to chanting the Panchakshari mahāśivarātri, the 5-syllabled mantra 108 times. Just reciting this mantra once will be equivalent to reciting the all-powerful Panchakshari of Om Namah Shivaya 108 times. So, hold on and make sure you see what VasanthiMā has to offer. But that's just the viruttam part. There's a song as well, as usual, the kriti. Now this particular mantra which she is going to sing as a viruttam, or a kind of spontaneous improvisation, this mantra that she has chosen for today was renewed and revealed just in the previous century by a contemporary legend whom many consider to be an avatar himself, kānci periyavā, that many of you are aware of, or Shankaracharya, Sri Chandrasekharendra Saraswati, who left his mortal coils just a few decades back. The mantra that he revealed, or rather resurrected, is ponnambalam tirucitrambalam arunachalam mahādeva mahalinga madhyajunesha, which we are blessed to hear in VasanthiMā's voice today. Ambalam here refers to the stage, and it occurs a couple of times, for the dance of our own nothingness. Why else would a stage be really required than for a dance of our own nothingness? That's the real stage. The stages onto which we all get on to give performances are absolutely nothing. But when nothingness performs, that is everything. The dance stage is described with the adjectives pon or golden. We say ponnambalam, golden stage. Or rather, the second word is with the adjective citra or chinna or small. Many people might be surprised why a great Deva or Mahadeva is having a small stage. But indeed it is small, for how big a stage does nothingness really require? Obviously, size 0. But how valuable is it? Metaphorically golden indeed, but really speaking, invaluable. Essentially, the dance stage is our conscious space, chidambaram, which is tinier than the tiniest conceivable entity and invaluable indeed. Not knowing what to call invaluable, we are saying golden stage or ponnambalam, and citrambalam or tirucitrambalam, because it's so tiny that it cannot even be measured. So that's why it's metaphysical. Physical things can be measured, but the metaphysical cannot be measured. It's so tiny that it's tinier than the tiniest. And that's citrambalam. And it's ponnambalam, more valuable than the most valuable, that is invaluable. Symbolically, various aspects of our profound and multifaceted inner self are consecrated in phenomenally powerful energy reservoirs that we call as mandir, kovil, devasthana or devasthanam, gudi or temples. If managed appropriately, even after the prana pratishta, these creative powerhouses, centuries later, creative powerhouses I say because they are garbhagrihas, they are like the womb of a mother, so creative. These creative powerhouses or garbhagrihas, griha really means house and garbha is the womb. The womb is the house for the fetus, the mother's womb. But this is the garbhagriha for the entire universe. So these creative powerhouses or garbhagrihas called temples, sanctum sanctorum of ancient temples and some of the appropriately consecrated modern temples too, retain the immense potential to work together, not just as single entities, each of these temples. Many of them were conceived in the conscious space of great seers or rishis as clusters, just like we have computer clusters these days in networks performing so awesome. Similarly, these temples like the Panchabhuta Stalas or the Navagraha Stalas are all forming certain networks, very intricate, highly sophisticated. And they retain the immense potential to work together, because that's the strength of a cluster, working together. So each of them is an immeasurable powerhouse. But when seen as a combo, as a network or power grid, because each of them has the śivalinga of stillness and its power, which is the Shakti in various forms and names. And when these are all ordered, arranged, and taken care of in a particular way, as a network operator would know, or the power grid operator would know without tripping, for more resourceful, utilitarian lives. In fact, far more resourceful, far more utilitarian, far deeply fundamental in their scientific basis, and far more sophisticated in technological processes than even our intellectual lifelines today, namely the internet and the World Wide Web. By thus working together as a spiritual network, various temple combos, like the two that I mentioned, the Navagraha Stalas or the 9 associated with the planetary bodies, the sun, moon, northern and southern nodes, and Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The ones which have a deep influence through their electromagnetic, gravitational, and unknown force fields on everything on earth as well. Because everything on earth is made out of the Panchabhutas. And to celebrate that and to unravel those mysteries and to reap the benefits, apart from the Navagraha Stalas, we have the Panchabhuta Stalas associated with the 5 elements as well. So by thus working together as a spiritual network, unlike a computational network, it's a spiritual network. Various temple combos help us unravel ourselves more easily. If you can already read yourself, well and good. If not, utilize these resources of temples. Most of us can't read ourselves, right? We can read so many other things by being literate. But even the illiterate can get to reading oneself by utilizing these helping hands, the resources of temples, to make yourself more easily readable to yourself, to make ourselves more easily readable to ourselves. That's the idea. And self, whether it is in yourself, ourself, myself, can be of 2 types. The self written with a small s and a self written with a big S, the uppercase, in which case it is the Atman, the real nature of a being. But on the other hand, if we have the same word SELF written with a small s, it could refer to our false identities, what is usually termed as the ego. So most of us need these aids, so-called temples. So much so that it was said, Gudi illada idathil kudiyirukka vendam. Gudi illada idathil kudiyirukka vendam. Gudi, kudi. Kudi is to live. Gudi is the temple. So Gudi illada idathil kudiyirukka vendam means never live in a place where there is no temple. A templeless region is indeed unlivable in the true sense of meaningful life. Get a life, we say, right? That's a modern phrase which youngsters use to tell somebody who's not into, let's say, drugs or drinks or sex. These kinds of people are usually ragged by the others who are into these things, saying, get a life, man. But what kind of an intoxication is that which deteriorates our physicality in terms of health, the mental performance, the intellectual performance over time, and destroys various dimensions of us just to get a few minutes of intoxication, and then you're out of it and you start depending on it so much so that you get addicted to it, and eventually you can't live without that. But the biggest and best way to get intoxicated is to go to the most powerful intoxicant, the dancer within us. When we have that within us, why the hell do we have to go to other things? It's just because we don't know the kind of intoxicating power that's within ourselves. So you might easily recognize most of the temples referred to by VasanthiMā in the mantra ponnambalam, tirucitrambalam. Yes, those two are the Natarājā temple in Chidambaram. Arunachalam, yes, Tiruvannamalai. Mahādeva Mahalinga Madhyarjunesha. That's where only a few might know what we are referring to. Yes, the first two, ponnambalam, tirucitrambalam, refer to Chidambaram, covering which element? The space element in the Vishuddha chakra, at the pit of our throat. That's actually just a conformal mapping. The real Vishuddha chakra is in the subtle body, not in the physical. But using complex numbers, which are not actually numbers but vectors with magnitude and direction, the real and imaginary, we can do a conformal mapping from the subtle dimensions to the physical dimension. And therefore we say in the pit of the throat. But don't think if you open it up, either in the front or the back in the spinal cord, you would see some chakra wheel rotating there. No. That's just a conformal mapping. But it helps. These mappings help because we have to work with the tools that we have, which are the body, mind, and intellect, the sense organs and the organs of action. And for this sake, we need to know how to handle these things in these realms, in these dimensions, not in the ultimate. So we map the ultimate to these dimensions and then work backwards to get back to who we really are. So Chidambaram covers through that first two words of this mantra, ponnambalam, tirucitrambalam, we cover the space element. That is one of the Panchabhutas. While the third word refers to Tiruvannamalai, covering the fire element. So these are two of the 5 Panchabhuta sthalas. So what's left out are the 3 states of matter. Because what we talked about are energy, which is represented by fire, which is in the Manipura chakra. The Manipura chakra, just behind the navel in the spinal cord, where Dharmashastra, Swami Charanam Ayyappa, is consecrated. That Manipura chakra is the location of the element of fire, which is actually energy. And in the outer world, it is Tiruvannamalai. But the real Tiruvannamalai, Arunachaleshwara, with the Unnamalai Amman, are actually right within us. If you can just meditate right behind your navel into the spinal cord and slowly transcend the physicality of it all into the subtle body, into the causal body and beyond, opening up your Annamaya Kosha or the physicality, opening up your Manomaya Kosha or your subtle mind, opening up your Pranamaya Kosha or your breath field, opening up your Jnanamaya Kosha or your intellectual field, and getting into the Anandamaya Kosha, the infinite bliss field, then you recognize that all these temples, Garbhagrihas, whether of Chidambaram, Akasha element, or the Tiruvannamalai fire element, they're all within us and can be mapped back to our physical body as well. So that is the beauty of it all. So what's left out after energy and space, which are not matter, by the way, in their original form, but can be converted to matter. Einstein's equation E is equal to mc squared is known, right? Between a matter of mass m and the energy that it actually contains, which is E. the factor between them being the square of the speed of light, which means perception is so very important. So the perceptivity at the speed of light, which is 3 into 10 power 8 meters per second, 3 lakh kilometers per second. That is all again in physical realms. So we go beyond the physicality here into the metaphysics. But to understand it all, we keep coming back to the physics and therefore to matter. So we have to look at the other three elements that we have made out of, other than energy at the navel and the space at the pit of the throat. What are those? They are the three states of matter, you know that, solid, liquid and gas. So what's left out are the three states of matter. Solid earth element at Kanchipuram as Ekambreshwara. The liquid water element at Tiruvannaikkaval as Jambukeshwara. And finally, the gaseous air at Sri Kalahasti in Andhra Pradesh as Sri Kalahastishwara. So the last line of the mantra to be recited by VasanthiMā leads us to the Mahalingeshwara temple, which is beyond all of these five elements. So we talked about the space element at the throat. We talked about the fire element or energy element at the navel. The solid earth element or Ekambreshwara of Kanchipura is at our Mooladhara chakra, the base of the spine. And then the Swadhisthana chakra, which is right behind our reproductive organs, once again in the spinal cord. The second chakra, Swadhisthana chakra, which houses Valli Deviyane and Muruga, as I've explained in one of the previous discourses as well. That's the chakra of the water element. That's Tiruvannaikkaval's Jambukeshwara. And finally, the Anahata chakra at the heart is where the gaseous air element, Sri Kalahastishwara, which is also Rahu Ketu Sthala, by the way, apart from the Tirunageswaram and Perambalam in Tamil Nadu, which are two separate Rahu and Ketu Sthalas. There is one in Sri Kalahasti with the air element as well, the Vayu Sthala. So you see that all these temples are actually within us and we can access them. Those of us who are, for example, not able to travel because of various medical or health reasons, don't need to worry at all. We have access to it right here and now within our own bodies by mapping each one of those temples into ourselves. And this is not something that we imagine and do and think that it is there. It is in fact what is here that has been put there because people could not experience these because of too much of physicality and materialism. But once you get back into your true spiritual nature, then you have it all right here. You really don't need those temples. But most people are not able to do that, and therefore the temples are extremely useful as powerful networks, the external temples. It's your choice, the internal temples, the inner yatra, or the outer temples, the outer pilgrimage yatra. So, as I said, we have to go beyond these five elements. In fact, 72% of our body is the liquid element. 12% is the solid element. And then about 6% is the gaseous element. And 4% is the energy element. The rest is the spatial element. When you say rest, if you subtract from 100% all the others that I said, 72, 12, 6 and 4, you would end up with 6%. But actually the space element is not just 6%. It would be 6% if all that you can go up to is the Vishuddhi chakra. But if you're able to go beyond the Vishuddhi chakra, beyond space, beyond all the elements, space itself is beyond the states of matter and energy. Now if you go beyond space as well, the space element can actually take you beyond 100%. That's why we just say rest. So 6% for those who can go up to the Vishuddhi chakra. For those who can go to the Agnya chakras, the Sahasrara chakra, it's just infinite. So the last line of the mantra to be recited by VasanthiMā shortly will lead us to the Mahalingeshwara temple, renowned as Madhyarjuna Kshetram. We talk about Madhya Kailash, for example, a temple just outside the campus of my beautiful IIT Madras at Chennai, where I studied from 88 to 92 doing my BTech, and used to frequently visit our neighbor, the Madhya Kailash. Why do we say Madhya Kailash? Because it's not Kailash, but it's in between. So it's Madhya, center. So somewhere in between. So similar way, this particular place, Mahalingeshwara temple, is renowned as Madhyarjuna Kshetram. Let me come to what Arjuna means in this context. Many of you are familiar with the character from the Mahabharata, one of the Pandavas, right? So this particular temple, renowned as Madhyarjuna Kshetram, it's at the consecrated medical spa. Yes, spa or resort of a temple. Literally, Tiruvidai Marudur. You can break it up in two ways. Tiruvidai Maradur or Tiruvidai Amadur or Maradur. Right? Tiruvidai Maradur or Tiruvidai Maradur. Or as a paramedic midwife in Tiruvidai Maradur. Whereas when you break it up as Tiruvidai Maradur, it's the consecrated medical spa or resort. In either case, it's your holistic well-being that this looks after. The Vaidishwaran Koil that I referred to in the previous discourse is medical in the sense of the physical and mental health, as well as surgery, etc., because of the Yelnayagi. But this is going even beyond that to a holistic well-being, including the intellectual and spiritual aspects as well. So this is rightly positioned, this particular place, Tiruvidai Maradur, is rightly positioned near the triangle of fullness. Can you guess what that place is? Triangle of fullness, triangle konam, fullness kumbham. So literally the triangle of fullness is Kumbhakonam, and near it is this beautiful place of Tiruvidai Maradur, with which today's composer Gopālakrśña Bhārati was deeply connected, and the second highest number of songs that he wrote probably were related to Tiruvidai Maradur. Of course, the first one is always reserved for Natarājā at Chidambaram, our conscious space. So Kumbhakonam and Tiruvidai Maradur are also in the state, lucky state of Tamil Nadu. The word Arjuna because I said it is Madhyarjuna Kshetram. So the word Arjuna refers to the medicinal characteristic again. Thiruvidai Maradur is about medicine. Arjuna is also about medicine. And Arjuna refers to the medicinal characteristic of purity and hygiene. It's symbolized by whiteness. Just like the white in the Indian flag refers to purity, peace, and clarity, cleanliness. Same way, here also Arjuna refers to that. As a sensual and passionate consequence. Why do I say that? Because he's the son of Indra. With the Mahabharata character also being a creative endeavor of Indra, who's not again a person somewhere sitting in one particular geographical or spatial location called heaven. It's right here. Our own external sensory perception through eyes, ears, nostrils, tongue and skin. That's having a creative endeavor of purity and hygiene, which is what the real Arjuna is in our day-to-day life, every moment, here and now. So, Madhyajanam, in fact, therefore, translates to Idai Marudu in Tamil also. Idai is middle, Marudu is Marundu, medicine, wherein the medicinal Marudu stands for the Sthalavraksham, Marudamaram, Marudamaram Mamaniye, Murugayya, another famous song. Hopefully VasanthiMā will sing that some other day. Biologically, it is Terminalia Arjuna in Latin, a wild, thorny medicinal plant or tree, the Arjuna tree. The presiding deity is our own nothingness, as the great symbol of lordship over oneself, Mahalingeshwara, Maha, great, Linga, symbol of lordship, Ishvara, Mahalingeshwara, the great symbol of lordship over what? Not over somebody else or some other region, over wealth, no, over oneself. That's the ultimate kingdom, empire. And that's the real emperor who can have lordship over oneself, who has absolute control over the physical, mental, intellectual, knowing fully that he or she is spiritual and he or she doesn't matter there because you've gone beyond physicality. Already you've lost most of your gender. Once you go beyond your mind, you've lost all of your gender, even at the intellectual plane, leave alone the spiritual. So the presiding deity is therefore our own nothingness, śivā, as the great symbol of lordship over oneself, Mahalingeshwara. Next, let us turn to VasanthiMā's main song for the day. Its melody or ragam is béhāg, which is a derivative of the jewel of our own slow, steady, and even still attractive magnetism. Still in the sense of stillness. It's not just slow, but it can even become still. So, this ragam, béhāg, for today's song is actually a derivative of the jewel of our own slow, steady, and even still attractive magnetism. Yes, what am I referring to? Dhīra, that is slow and steady and still. Shankara, attractive magnetism. Abharanam, jewel. So the jewel of our own slow, steady, and even still attractive magnetism is Dhīra Shankara Abharanam, one of the Melakarta ragas, the 29th Melakarta raga, in fact. And today's béhāg ragam is Dhira Shankarabharana Janyam. That is, it is born out of that 29th Melakarta by removing some of the Saptaswaras. So despite its usage of a double Madhyamam, béhāg is actually a Janya of this Melakarta. Again, pertinent to the significance of centering, because double Madhyamam, no? Madhyamam is actually referring here to Sariga Ma Padani. So the Ma is the Madhyamam, right? But double Madhyamam, Madhya also means center, because Sariga is on one side, Ma is in the middle, Padani, the other three are on this side. So Ma is right in the middle, and that's why it's called Madhyamam. And this rag béhāg, ragam béhāg, has two Madhyamams. Again pertinent to Idai, Tiruvidai Maradur, yes, the middle. So pertinent to the significance of centering in our self-healing sadhana. So the real medicinal value is in self-healing. First, prevention is better than cure, but once you have got into something, either through external infection or through your own creation, most of the diseases are our own creation, right? So because of our poor lifestyles and our karmic reflections over this and the previous lives. So the usage of double Madhyamam here is pertinent to the significance of centering in our self-healing sadhana, referred to as Idai in Tiruvidai Maradur. Béhāg is an enchanting ragam, incorporated perhaps from the Hindustani genre, rag béhāg, and adopted to the Carnatic style. Carnatic béhāg is further influenced by other rags such as kamas, and has foreign phrases and notes beyond its two madhyamams, according to Prince Rāmavarma. Being a ragam with a twist, Vakratunda, Ganesha, the one with a twisted trunk, and béhāg is a ragam with a twist, that is a vakra scale, kind of retrograde, and having, like Rahu and Ketu, are always retrograde. Sun and Moon can never be retrograde. The other 5 planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn, can sometimes be direct and sometimes go retrograde, because it's an earth fixed frame of reference. Similarly, béhāg being a ragam with a twist, that is a vakra scale, and having, as I said already, imported notes, béhāg can be deciphered more by its distinct phrases rather than merely a cycle of ascension or arohanam and descension or avarohanam. For all ragas, we usually talk about arohanam, the climb, and avarohanam, the descent. But here, more than those swaras from the saptaswaras, has a combination in the arohanam and avarohanam, ascension and descension, climbing up the hill and down the hill. Here, we are more interested in the phrases. Well, all that goes up has to come down, but in the case of béhāg, it's with a twist, like the winding paths to a hill station, or more importantly, a hill shrine. Vah! Parvataraja Tanaya, Parvati Pataye, Kailasha Pataye, Har Har Mahadev. Isn't it? So amazing. Béhāg is usually used by the natarājā fans those whose Ishta Devata is Natarājā. And this is a guy of Kailash. So I say, Va Parvata Raja Thanaya Parvati Pataye Kailasha Pataye Har Har Mahadev. No composition in béhāg has been discovered from the repertoire of Tyagaraja, Shyama Shastri and Muthuswami Dikshita. Perhaps because béhāg was adopted from the Hindustani genre after the 18th century, in the Common Era CE, graced by these Carnatic Trimurtis, Tyagaraja, Shyama Shastri and Muthuswami Dikshita. Perhaps as a compensation, in the very next century, that is the 1800s, the Trimurtis were in the 1700s and, well, they were born in the 1700s, but they lived partly in the 1800s as well. So perhaps as a compensation, in the very next century, that is the 1800s, there are quite a few Gopālakrśña bhārati compositions in béhāg. Gopālakrśña bhārati, 1810 to 1890s, lived pretty much in the 19th century, the 1800s. And he's composed quite a few in the béhāg ragam, which the Trimurtis didn't. So apart from today's āDum cidambaramō, it's a question. It's not saying eppadi aadinaro, we said last time. That is also a question asked by a different composer. But now we are asking, āDum cidambaramō is again in the form of wonder or inquisitive songs. He's written two more in the same ragam, same Gopālakrśña bhārati. Again, wonder or inquisitiveness is so very important. And that's what Katham is also all about. How? The how is very, very important. It's not what you do, but how you do it. So it's basically an inquiry. You do self-enquiry, right? And so these songs are also starting in the very Pallavi, first line of the song, is with a question, in inquiry mode. So two more such songs of Sri Gopālakrśña bhārati, which start with a query, are Idudano Tillai Sthalam. Is this the place, Tillai? And Irakkal Varamal Ponadhenna. Irakkal Varamal Ponadhenna. Why are you not getting compassion? You had many such songs from Tyagaraja also and the other Trimurtis, where they are pleading, especially Shyama Shastri, pleading why the time has still not come for my self-realization. Why is it I still am a sadhak, not a seer, a rishi? These are questions that keep occurring to people who are so desperate to reach the goal because they have recognized the insignificance of physicality and the ultimate significance of metaphysicality, and they are in a hurry to get there in their yatra. So let's see. Irakkal Varamal Ponadhenna. And there's a very interesting story that is associated with Gopālakrśña bhārati. When he went to a great Tamil Pullavar who would not see him in spite of his repeated visits and requests, and was actually inside the house, but his wife was telling Gopālakrśña bhārati that he's asleep. Then he said, I will wait anyway, he has to wake up. When he wakes up, I'll meet him. And he sat right outside the house and started singing, because that's the best pastime that he could have. And the song he sang at that time is this one, this question song in béhāg. Irakkal varamal ponadenna. Though he was referring to Chidambaram Natarājā, the Tamil Pullavar recognized that it is something that applies to him as well, that he's not having compassion on this person who wants to have an appointment with him for so many days. He came out and actually that Tamil Pullavar sang a song in Tamil which is in praise of gopālakrśña bhārati. Usually you've heard songs in praise of divinity, songs in praise of royalty, but here's a song in the praise of a singer-composer himself by a peer who is probably far senior to him, Sri Meenakshi Sundareshwarar. That was the name of that great Pullavar or literature. So apart from these two songs and āDum cidambaramō, there are many others composers apart from the Trinity who have composed in béhāg ragam. Skandén by Arunachala Kavi, Vanajaksha, the Varnam that was perfected and popularized by T.R. Subramaniam, Shankaranin by Neelakanta Shivan, Narayanate Namo by the much earlier period Annamacharya. béhāg could not have existed then, right? But only the song was by, the lyrics were by Annamacharya. Like in today's movies, the lyrics are by somebody, music is by somebody, and the singer is somebody else, and it's lip synced by the actors. So there's so many people involved. Similarly, Narayanate Namo, the lyrics are by Annamacharya, almost 500, 600 years back, but they were tuned into béhāg recently by Balamurali Krishna, Balamurali Krishna, who passed away recently. Then there is Samudravanu Kandu by Purandaradasa, again in the same period as Annamacharya. This is in Kannada. Saramaina, a famous javali, a dance item that is, by Swati Tirunal, the great composer from Kerala, who has also so we have covered Karnataka's contribution to béhāg through Purandaradasa, Andhra's contribution through Annamacharya, and Kerala's contribution to béhāg through Swati Tirunal. Saramaina. It's very famous. A lot of performers even today on stage don't miss Saramaina. Swati Tirunal has also composed other kritis such as Smarajanaka and Reena Madanuta, Vagaladi Bodhanalaku, a javali by Tirupati Narayana Swami, Oruthi Maganai, and Andal Tirupave. Andal is almost a millennia ago, but again it's tuned into this new ragam béhāg by Ariyakudi Ramanuja Iyengar, about whom we discussed while we were talking about a few other composers earlier. Muruganin Marupeyar by Guru Surajananda, and Kamaladhala Kannan by Dr. E.S. Shankaranarayana Iyer. Apart from this not so exhaustive list and many tillanas and javalis in béhāg, this ragam is also extensively used in viruttams, ragamalikas, and ragam tanam pallavis, what are known as RTPs, partly due to its inherent charm and partly due to the ease with which it can be uniquely meandered, as you will clearly hear and observe in VasanthiMā's rendition today. But before that, I have to finish a few more formalities. Like I've talked about the ragam, I have to talk about the talam. Yes, the danceable rhythm for today's song by VasanthiMā is of course the primordial creative sound of the dhamru. Yes, you guessed it right. It's the all-pervading Adi talam. Adi means ancient, antique, without a beginning. for our Adi Guru, Adi Yogi, and Adi Nata, Satyam Shivam Sundaram. मेरे जीवन साथी प्यार किए जा, जवानी दीवानी खूबसूरत जिद्दी पड़ोसन, सत्यम शिवम सुंदरम, सत्यम शिवम सुंदरम, सत्यम शिवम सुंदरम. The composer for today's song is Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati, a great saint, a self-realized soul, amazing personality, whose Ishtadevata or favorite deity was the same as that of two of the Tamil movers, Sri Marimuthu Pillai and of course Sri Muthu Tandavar, whom we celebrated on this very channel of Srimati Vasanta Kumari Sampath just last week. You guessed it right. The Ishta Devata for today's composer, Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati, is also our own nothingness, as the emperor of the cosmo-atomic dance in our own conscious space, as the invaluable stage. Ponnambalam, tirucitrambalam. Yes, it's the irreplaceable and irrepressible natasarvabhauma tillai natarājā of chidambaram. Naturally, most of Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati's songs are also on the king of dance, Natarājā. According to a modern legend, the then young Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati once visited Sri Tyagaraja. Yes, they were contemporaries. The bard of Tiruvayyar, who was 43 years elder to Gopālakrśña Bhārati. In a befittingly musical welcome to the young guest, 43 years younger to him, Sri Tyagaraja, not himself, but his disciples, sang a kriti of their own master Tyagaraja, Manasu Nilpa, in the ragam Abhogi. Bhogi, Abhogi. The purport of the song was that if we haven't acquired or developed and also implemented the sublime technology of consciously witnessing our own thoughts through Shravana, Manana and Nitidhyasana. Shravana, you have to hear or learn from somebody, acquire it. And then Manana, reflect over it, develop it. And also Nitidhyasana, eventually apply it, implement it. So if we haven't acquired or developed and also implemented, if we have stuck up somewhere in between or done not even the acquisition part to start with, the sublime of what? The sublime technology of consciously witnessing our own thoughts, that is Dhyana Meditation, and emotions, both of which are happening in our subtle body. Thus sublimating our mind, which automatically disappears like burning pieces of camphor around our physical body. Yes, the subtle or mental, intellectual bodies are not inside, like the brain is inside, but our intellect, our mind are centered in the Ajna Chakra and exist beyond our body, at least for some of us who are into intellectual work. But our emotions and our intellectual apparatus which is subtle in nature. Both of these are subtle in nature, emotional and intellectual apparatus. And these exist beyond our physical body. They are centered within the body, but exist beyond the body. And that's why when you take a bath, you feel fresh not only physically, but even emotionally, and sometimes you're intellectually charged. We'll talk about Archimedes shortly. Yes, the bath at least twice a day is a must for yogis, and this is one of the reasons. You're cleansing not only yourself physically, but also subtly, and maybe to some extent causally too. So, we're sublimating our mind, which automatically disappears like burning pieces of camphor around our physical body, I said, to refer to the subtle body. Then of what avail will be our extravagant display of archana? Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, with flowers and ringing of bells. How can our dip in the holy waters of Kaveri or Ganga purify us if we are puffed up with haughtiness and self-conceit resulting from false identification with our toolkit of body, mind and intellect? If the wife of a Somayaji, I'm not talking of that particular person, K.N. Somayaji, but anybody who is involved with Samagana are called as Somayajis. So if the wife of any Somayaji indulges in illicit love, will his Somayaga befit him to the heavenly abode? No amount of austerity can confer spiritual merit on a person if he or she is lusty and or angry. So this was Tyagaraja's song sung by his disciples to Gopālakrśña Bhārati, a young composer himself visiting the bard's house. So Tyagaraja's song ended with his students pleading, "Please enlighten me, O Lord." The O Lord is the one inside. Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati actively listened. That's very important. Most of us have become passive listeners, if at all we listen. It's important to listen and to listen actively. And that's what Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati did. And that means there's going to be something that's going to be happening in him and by him for others very soon. So Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati actively listened to the wonderful song sung by Tyagaraja's students, the song which was composed by Tyagaraja himself. Subsequently, as was and should still be the custom prior to an invited lunch with the Tyagaraja family, Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati went to bathe in the river Kaveri just outside the house. Tiruvayar is on the banks of the holy river Kaveri. And instantaneously, Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati composed a kriti after the bath, which has become very popular over the ages. Yes? Any guesses? Especially the dancers amongst you who are watching? Yeah. Sabhapatikke vera deivam samanamaguma. Sabhapatiki vera deivam samanamaguma. Can there be any other divinity which can compare with the one who lords over the stage? That's the dancer. Tillai sabhapatikke vera deivam samanamaguma. This spontaneous and extempore outpouring, aka Archimedes' principle of buoyancy, announced with a bathed and bare-bodied Ambala discoverers, literally running commentary, or rather outcry of Eureka, Eureka. Yes, Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati's rendition on the Emperor of Cosmo-Atomic Dance in our conscious space was also in the same ragam, Abhogi, which he had just heard from the students of Tyagaraja. It didn't matter that Sri Gopālakrśña Bharati's song was in nascent Tamil instead of Sri Tyagaraja's chaste Telugu, as both had the lowest common denominator, or LCD, spirit of non-duality. Yes, that's the ultimate LCD, lowest common denominator. That denominator gets so low, because it's supposed to be lowest common denominator, that it becomes a zero or nothingness. Śivā. And that's non-duality, Advaita. When Sri Gopālakrśña Bharati came back to Sri Tyagaraja's house after his bath and after his composition, Sri Tyagaraja, very interestingly, another great genius and self-realized soul, as we know from our previous songs in this channel, asked Sri Gopālakrśña Bharati, Tyagaraja asked Gopālakrśña Bharati, if he has also composed any kriti in Abhogi. And yes, he has, just a few minutes ago, right? Sri Gopālakrśña Bharati therefore humbly revealed that he had done so right after hearing Tyagaraja's kriti and sang it for him. Tillai sabhapatiki samana vara deivamaguma. No. It's said that Tyagaraja, who himself is named after Śivā, our own nothingness, was so impressed that he showered praise, blessings and grace on the 43-year younger composer Sri Gopālakrśña Bharati, an equally self-realized soul, Jivan Mukta. Through music they realized who they were. And who they were is God themselves. The phrase Ariya Pulayar Mover, again we are coming to the movers and shakers, is a different set of three, a different trinity. The phrase Ariya Pulayar Mover, Pulayar, the so-called lower castes those days. Ariya means, even though they were segregated and discriminated as the lower caste, many of them, and in particular these three, the movers and shakers, were Ariya Pulayar mover. And Gopālakrśña Bharati has sung a lot about them, and in particular one of them, Nandanar. So the phrase Ariya Pulayar mover evokes deep feelings in everyone who hears this kriti. It is widely known that Sri Gopālakrśña Bharati, although born a Brahmin, was an ardent supporter of the downtrodden folks, especially Harijans, as is obvious from his magnum opus, Nandanar Charitra Kirtanai. People write kritis, short songs, and even shorter songs like what we saw in the last discourse. But here, it's a magnum opus. It's an opera. Nandanar Charitra Kirtanai. And that is about the so-called Harijans or lower caste, who are discriminated against in those days. It's a Tamil opera glorifying the low caste farmhand Nandan. Yes, there was a person by name Nandan who was into natarājā bhakti. Though he was an agriculturist by profession and was treated as an untouchable. And why did Gopālakrśña Bharati choose him? It was an instantaneous, spontaneous choice, because he saw nobody better than Nandanar. Nandan, with respect, is Nandanar. The choice of Nandan was for his flagrant bhakti and later induction into the Nayanmar Hall of Fame as Tirunalaipovar. The term Ariyapulayar mover refers to three untouchables, Nandanar, Tillai Vettiyan and Peran Samban, who all lived in the area around Tillai and were supposed to have realized themselves, and I am telling themselves with an uppercase S over here, that is self-realization, and were supposed to have self-realized purely through their piety and devotion, bhakti, to whatever they were doing. They were farmers to farming and whatever tasks they were into. So Nandanar was featured in the Periyapuranam by Sekirar, but the Charitram which Gopālakrśña Bhārati wrote went even beyond what was stated in the Periyapuranam. 70% of it came from the inner realization of Gopālakrśña Bhārati of what somebody who lived almost 1,000 years before him, Nandanar, actually went through. He lived through that and wrote that. So the other two of the movers that I'm talking about of the lower caste lived in later times. Just like the one chosen by VasanthiMā last time was the foremost of that set of Tamil movers. And here again she's chosen the foremost of the lower caste Trimurtis. A fervent Shaivite by name, Umapati Shivacharya, in the 14th century, the common era, initiated Peran Sambhan, a person born as a Pulayar, into Shaivism or into nothingness. A prohibited act those days, under the guidance of a letter given by Śivā himself, in whatever form he takes for the sake of his devotees. Our own nothingness is amazing. The ardent Shaivite was excommunicated by the Tillai Brahmins for that sacrilegious act. This action has a parallel in early 20th century, and we have looked at it in the song Chinnanjiru Kiliye by VasanthiMā when I talked about Subramanya Bhārati, another Bhārati, who came more than 100 years, maybe 200 years after Gopālakrśña Bhārati. But they have the same surname, Bhārati. Bhava, Raga and Thala obviously are inculcated into their family. So this action has a parallel in the early 20th century too, as seen by the ostracism of Subramanya Bhārati by the Brahmin community, his own community again, for his reformist activities in making people realize that caste was just a division of labor for convenience of living life, not by birth to be discriminated against. The dignity of labor, of a farmer, a laborer, doctor, engineer, politician, businessman, any profession for that matter, has to be there. They're all equally important for society, and each one of them has to be given the dignity for how they perform their jobs. Not for what job they perform, but for how they perform whatever their job is. So, Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati glorified the Ariyapulayar mover, these three from the so-called lower castes, by including them in his kritis. It's invariably a person from another segment of the society who works for the upliftment of folks from an oppressed segment. You've seen this not only in India, but in all the foreign countries, where there's been amazing racial discrimination, far, far more than the Indian caste system, which is talked about so much by the Westerners without realizing that they have their own blacksmiths, butlers, even today. So their family names are based on their professions, not what they're doing today, but the professions of their ancestors. What nonsense. And they criticize the Indian caste system without knowing the source of it and how it went into degradation because of a few greedy folks. So the folks from an oppressed segment suffered, and there were many from the so-called oppressing classes who came to their rescue as well. It's not the Westerners who came to their rescue. They came to their rescue just in the name of their missionary zeal of conversions. So the utter global failure of socialism and communism is another example in the same sense. Because here there are two Brahmins, Subramanya Bharati, and in the 20th century, and in the 19th century, Gopālakrśña Bharati, who came to the rescue despite being themselves from the so-called higher castes. They came to the rescue of the lower castes. The same is the case if you look at why there is an utter global failure of socialism and communism, except perhaps in the state of Kerala in India, maybe for a few more years. This was also because the haves, that means people who have, the haves did only lip service to these philosophies of Marxism, Leninism, etc. Right? They did only lip service to these philosophies. They talked about equality, but they kept accumulating wealth. You see that even in today's Communist Party in China, how rich they are, the members of that so-called Communist Party. While the have-nots rose in agitation for its practical implementation. Imagine the people who are having are talking about equality but hoarding, and those who are not having it are using violent agitation to get it. Will it ever work? This is the kind of sad state that communism fell into, and Eastern Europe already showed its door, and most other countries have shown its door, except China, North Korea, maybe. It's no difference between dictatorialism and communism in the way it is practiced, despite all the high-meaning attributes to it. So, the haves did only lip service to these philosophies of Marxism, while the have-nots rose in agitation for its practical implementation. Spiritual processes, on the other hand, very, very different from communism. Though communism looks like it's going to bring you equity, it never did. But spiritual processes look like they do not bring equity, but that's what they did. So spiritual processes have succeeded for ages where communism has failed for centuries. Because spiritual processes, on the other hand, unlike communism, non-violently ensure true equity as they go beyond these dichotomies. And I'm not talking of religions, I'm talking of spirituality. Because spirituality ensures through its scientific and technologically capable processes, it ensures true equity as they go beyond these dichotomies of the haves and have-nots, putting practicality in the hands of the haves and philosophies in the minds of the have-nots, exactly opposite of what communism did. Thus emphasizing fundamental duties towards dharma and moksha over fundamental rights towards artha and kama. They're all purusharthas, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. But Artha and Kama are more towards fundamental rights. They're important, but more important are the other two Purusharthas, Dharma and Moksha, which refer to our fundamental duty. If you don't do your duty, you don't have any rights. There are people who just seek rights, whether it's human rights or whatever, without fulfilling their duties. No, you have to do your duty and then ask for your rights. You don't do your duty, then you have no right to ask for rights. But we give it nonetheless. But where is your conscience if you're not fulfilling your duties and still seek only the rights? It's life of a parasite. So irrespective of whether we are rich or poor, be it in terms of health, wealth, strength or intellect, because richness and poorness is not only in terms of wealth. So the equity has to be brought in not only in terms of wealth, but in terms of health also. It's not that only some people have the right to health and the others don't. So it's our duty to see to it that everybody has access to clean water and lifestyles which can prevent diseases and therefore ensure a holistic health. Similarly, strength. There are haves and have-nots, rich and poor in terms of strength, physical strength, mental strength, intellectual strength also. So there are all kinds of inequalities. But ensuring equity in spite of all these inequalities is what only spiritual processes can do, not religion, not communism. So be it in terms of health, wealth, strength or intellect, it is the disparity that can be wiped out just by recognizing who we all really are, nothingness or everythingness. And it's the oneness of everythingness and nothingness that Gopālakrśña bhārati really stood for. In fact, many of his songs are about the oneness of Vishnu and Śivā, which is of course mentioned in the Vedas also. It's only the fans of Śivā and fans of Vishnu who fight with each other. It's like Rajnikant and Kamal Haasan are friends, but their fans fight against each other. That's the ridiculousness, because in this case, nothingness and everythingness are two sides of the same coin. It's how you look at it, whether you're looking at the cosmic theory of relativity or you're looking at the quantum theory of the subatomic length scales. They are essentially the same physics, right? And metaphysics is that connectivity between the classical continua with the relativistic large scales and the quantum small scales. So the onus is thus on the haves, whether it is rich in wealth, strong in the physique, or healthy, or whatever, intellectually more capable. All these haves, it's the onus is on them. To do what? To naturally share rather than the have-nots. For example, I am said to be an intellectual. So the best thing for me is to be a teacher. And teaching, I find, is the best way to learn. Right? So this comes naturally to me. I just am addicted to teaching. So in that sense, the onus is thus on the haves to naturally share whatever they have. If this, for the strong to share their strength, for the healthy to share their health, for the wealthy to share their wealth, and for the intellectuals to share their intellectuality. Rather than the have-nots to violently dare and snatch from the haves. That's never going to happen. That's always going to lead to bloodshed on both sides. It's unfortunate, but that's what communism and religions also have led to. But spirituality turns this on top of its head, as I just explained. So on this poignant note, please go ahead with your 7 notes, VasanthiMā.
cidambaramō āDum cidambaramō ஐயன் கூத்தாடும் சிதம்பரமோ ஆடு சிதம்பரமோ ஐயன் கூத்தாடும் சிதம்பரமோ ஆடு சிதம்பரமோ ஐயன் கூத்தாடும் சிதம்பரமோ ஆடு சிதம்பரமோ ஆடும் சிதம்பரம் ஆடும் சிதம்பரம் அன்பர் களிக்கவே ஆடு சிதம்பரம் அன்பர் களிக்கவே ஆடும் சிதம்பரம் அன்பர் களிக்கவே ஆடும் சிதம்பரம் அன்பர் களிக்கவே ஆடும் சிதம்பரம் அன்பர் களிக்கவே நாடும் சிதம்பரம் நம சிவாயவென்று நாடும் சிதம்பரம் நம சிவாய வென்று ஆடும் சிதம்பரமோ ஐயன் கூத்தாடும் சிதம்பரமோ ஆடு சிதம்பரமோ யாரும் அறியாமல் யாரும் அறியாமல் அம்பலவானார் 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 சீரடியார் பார்க்க சேவடி தூக்கி நின்று சீரடியார் பார்க்க சேவடி தூக்கி நின்று சீரடியார் பார்க்க சேவடி தூக்கி நின்று ஆடு சிதம்பரமோ ஐயன் கூத்தாடும் சிதம்பரமோ ஆடும் சிதம்பரமோ பாலகிருஷ்ணன் போற்றும் பணிமதி சடையினா பாலகிருஷ்ணன் போற்றும் பணிமதி சடையினால் பாலகிருஷ்ணன் போற்றும் பணிமதி சடையினால் பாலகிருஷ்ணன் போற்றும் பணிமதி சடையினார் தாளமதளம் போட தாதை தை என்று பாலகிருஷ்ணன் போற்றும் பணிமதி சடையினார் தாளமதளம் போட தாதை தை என்று ஆடும் சிதம்பரமோ பாலகிருஷ்ணன் போற்றும் பணிமதி சடையினார் தாளமதளம் போட தாதை தை என்று தாதை தை என்று தாதை தை என்று ஆடும் சிதம்பரமோ ஐயன் கூத்தாடும் சிதம்பரமோ ஆடும் சிதம்பரமோ பொன்னம்பலம் tirucitrambalam அருணாச்சலம் மகாதேவ மகாலிங்க மத்யாச்சுனேஷா பொன்னம்பலம் tirucitrambalam அருணாச்சலம் மகாதேவ மகாலிங்க மத்யாச்சுனேஷா பொன்னம்பலம் tirucitrambalam அருணாச்சலம் மகாதேவ மகாலிங்க மத்யாச்சுனேஷா ஓம் சிவாய நமः ஓம் நமः சிவாய நமः ஓம் பார்வதிபதயே ஹர ஹர மகாதேவ்.
Very good. Oh, you just mesmerized us. And the natarājā has gone into me, back to where he came from, my sahasrara. In the subtle body, of course, thanks to your song. So let me say a little more about Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati, and then, of course, an Advaitic interpretation of whatever you sang. Both the Virutam as well as the Kriti. I'll give an Advaitic interpretation to both of them. But before that, we have to honor the great composer Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati, who lived between 1810 to 1896. He was born in a Brahmin family in Narimanam near Nagapattinam and lived in and around Mayuram. He lived a celibate life. He was ostracized by the Orthodox Brahmins for performing a kālakśñam, religious story discourses on Tirunīlakanta Nayanar, a potter by profession, one of the 63 Nayanmars, as I referred to before VasanthiMā's song too. His Nandanar Charitram received great acclaim, and kritis from that opera are trending even today in the concert circuits. Margari Utsavams, if you go to Chennai, it's an amazing musical celebration for a month, and you would say that many of those performances will definitely include at least one Gopālakrśña Bhārati composition, and that too from Nandanar Charitram. And his compositions number more than 1,000, with opera songs alone accounting for about 400. So some of the other songs of Sri Gopālakrśña Bhārati which are popular include Varugalamu Ayya in Manji Ragam, சற்றே விலகி இரும்பிள்ளை in Purvi Kalyani Ragam, Varuvaro in Sama Ragam, Endrendrum Mundan in Devagandhari Ragam, Yeppo Varuvaro in Jonpuri Ragam, and Tiruvadi Charanam in Kamboji Ragam. Several musicians in the past and present have sung Sri Gopālakrśña Bharati's kritis in concerts with utmost dignity. The late K.V. Narayanaswamy's rendering of Varugalamō is considered a classic by many. Other present-day musicians who have rendered Sri Gopālakrśña Bharati's kritis are T.N. Sheshagopalan, Sriram Gangadharan, Bombay Sisters, Sudha Raghunathan, Nityashri Mahadevan, and Sanjay Subramanyam, among others. So, with this brief biography of the great Sri Gopālakrśña Bharati, let me now move on to an Advaitic interpretation of today's song first. In the Pallavi, VasanthiMā asked the question which Gopālakrśña Bharati also asked. What is it? Is this our conscious space where our own nothingness dances? Is it the dancing conscious space? Is it our conscious space where our own nothingness dances? That's such a simple sounding question, but so very profound. In the Anupallavi, Sri Gopālakrśña Bharati and VasanthiMā go on to answer this question. Our conscious space is for our utmost devotion to whatever we are currently doing consciously as our duties. That's devotion. Devotion is not to some god sitting somewhere in Vaikunta or Kailasha or heaven or Jannat. No. Our conscious space is for our utmost devotion to whatever we are currently doing consciously as our duties. And this conscious space that we have centered in the Ajna and infinitely spreading out, the more spiritually evolved we are, the more it is spread out. So this conscious space is for our utmost devotion to enjoy its own bliss. Yes, our bhakti enjoys its own ananda. How? By watching the cosmo-atomic dance of our own nothingness. Śivā, natarājā. And seek to undertake the inner pilgrimage by chanting the transcendental sound mahāśivarātri. Na refers to Nagaraja Yajñopavita, Ganesha in our Mūladhara chakra. Ma refers to M for Muruga in the Swadhisthana chakra. She refers to Shasta, Dharma Shasta in our Manipura chakra. And then you have Va refers to Vishnu in our Anahata chakra. And Ya refers to Yakundendu, Tushara Hara Dhavala, Saraswati Brahma in our Vishuddhi chakra, representing the earth, water, energy or fire, air or gas, and space, the 5 elements out of which all of us are made up. So, we have to go beyond these 5 elements and make our Kundalini Shakti ascend beyond these 5 lower chakras to the Ajna chakra, beyond space, beyond all the 5 elements, beyond the Panchabhutas. And then automatically we are transmuted by Devi Parvati, the Ajna chakra at our third eye to the Sahasrara chakra. I'm showing these points as merely conformal mappings in the physical body, but they essentially exist in the subtle body, as I explained before. VasanthiMā sang this song as well. So, once again, this Anupallavi is so beautiful. We need to look at it, that our conscious space is for our utmost devotion to enjoy its own bliss and seek to undertake the inner pilgrimage. The real yatra is in. The only way out is in. And how do you do that? By chanting the transcendental sound which covers the first 5 chakras. Na for the Mooladhara, Ma for the Swadhisthana, Shi for the Manipura chakra, Va for the Anahata chakra, and Ya for the Vishuddhi chakra. So that Namah Shivaya, and you intersperse that with āDum, which is essentially the Ajna Sahasrara and beyond, the Pitruloka and the Guru Chakra, above the Sahasrara. That's the silence between 2 chants of Aum Namah Shivaya. Namah Shivaya. So you see, you can actually feel the reverberations when you say Na, as if Ganesha is singing for you in the Mooladhara chakra at the base of your spine. When you're reciting Ma sound, you see that Muruga is actually singing it at the Swadhisthana chakra, right behind our reproductive organs. When you're saying Shi, it's Dharmashasta, Manikanta, Swami Sharamayappa singing it in the Manipura chakra, right behind our navel. And when you say Va, it's actually Lakshmi, Narayana in the form of Vishnu, who's singing it in the Anahata chakra, right behind our heart in the spinal cord. And when we say Ya, it's Yakundendu Tushara Hara Dhavala, Saraswati singing it along with her consort Brahma in our Vishuddhi chakra. And when all of this happens, and then you recite Aum, then you go to the Ajna and Sahasrara and beyond into the silence. Dhyanam, Maunam, Jnanam. It's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. Because you have to do this chanting of this transcendental sound, the Panchakshari mantra, Namah Shivaya, with absolute involvement. Otherwise, mechanical chanting will have its own benefits, but incomparably small compared to what you would if you were to chant these with total involvement. So it's our own dancing conscious space for entertaining our own devotion. It's our own dancing conscious space for entertaining our own devotion, is what Gopālakrśña Bhārati and VasanthiMā said in the Anupallavi. It's our own dancing conscious space where our body, mind and intellect toolkit in unison, not individually but in unison, deeply long to chant Namah Shivaya. So the chant is not only by the body through my mouth, But my mind, my intellect, they're all combining in this chant. Aum Namah Shivaya, Aum Namah Shivaya, Aum Namah Shivaya, Aum Namah Shivaya. Then we move on to the Charanam, the main part of the song, or the feet on which it stands. That's why it's called Charanam, as opposed to Pallavi and Anupallavi. In the Charanam, what is this new, or actually the original Bharatiyar, Gopālakrśña Bharati, what does he sing? He says, our own nothingness of the invaluable hall, ponnambalam, our own nothingness, śivā, natarājā, our own nothingness of the invaluable hall. The invaluable hall is right here, in here, my friend, not in some town of Tamil Nadu called Chidambaram. Yes, it is there too, but even more accessible is right here at all times, wherever you are. So our own nothingness of the invaluable hall keeps dancing to let our sincere devotion watch. Yes, our bhakti watches over this dance at the Sahasrara. The bhakti is here of the Devi to Shiva, our own nothingness, and the Devi or bhakti is watching over our jnana, our Shiva, dancing it out. So our own nothingness of the invaluable hall keeps dancing to let our sincere devotion watch and be entertained in absolute surrender. Our own nothingness, without anyone from our body, mind, intellect, toolkit noticing. The body doesn't notice it, the mind doesn't notice it, the intellect doesn't notice it. But our own nothingness, without anyone from the BMI toolkit noticing, dances. Our own nothingness dances unnoticed by raising its point of surrender. Its point of surrender. By raising its point of surrender, our own nothingness is dancing. And it's raised our own point of nothingness, surrender point, so high that our own sincere devotion effortlessly witnesses it and naturally dissolves into it. For what else is true surrender, Sharanagati or Bhakti, in its ultimate form, is Jnana, Advaita, non-duality, being one with our own nothingness. And in the second Charanam, Gopālakrśña Bharati sings, our own nothingness has the matted locks. You see the matted locks here? Involvement without entanglement. Talked to you about it last time too. And I'm maintaining it. Involvement without entanglement. Are you? So our own nothingness has the matted locks of involvement merely appearing as entanglement to the untrained eyes, adorned by the cool crescent moon, symbolizing our distinction. Right? So the right half is the sun or the Pingala, and the left half, reserved for the Devi, is the moon, the Chandra adorning the head. So our own nothingness has the matted locks of involvement merely appearing as entanglement to the untrained physical eyes, but not to the trained third eye of intuition at the Ajna, represented or conformally mapped to the pituitary gland and the pineal glands in our endocrine system. Adorned by the cool crescent moon, symbolizing our distinction from our gradually disappearing mind. Doesn't disappear all of a sudden. The moon takes 15 days to wane and 15 days to wax, right? It's a whole month. And it's that monthly period which has resulted in the birth of you, me, and all of us because of our mother's menstrual cycles synchronizing with this waxing and waning of the moon, which is nothing but the fluidy nature of our mind, which gradually disappears and just about to disappear on the Shivaratri night. And what a profound week it has been. So symbolizing our distinction from our gradually disappearing mind, we are not the mind. In fact, we are not only the mind, we are way, way beyond it. Our own nothingness is lauded by our nascent magnetism, bhālakrśña. Gopālakrśña Bhārati is very smart. He's used his name, Gopālakrśña, as well as his pen name sometimes, the other mudra that he uses, Balakrishna, very intelligently. Here he says, Balakrishna prays to Śivā. This is not to put down Vaishnavism or show Shaivism in a greater light, but to show their oneness. Because those who think of the Hari-Hara Bhedam, the difference between Hari and Hara, are losing the very point of the concepts that we have created of Hari and Hara. It's only to help us we have created the two out of the one, and then we think these two are rivals of each other. What nonsense. So, he says, our own nothingness is lauded by our nascent magnetism, Bhālakrśña. For who else has the power to attract the principle of attraction itself but a black hole? Yes, the black hole attracts everything, including attraction itself. Who else has the power to attract the principle of attraction itself but a black hole? And therefore our own nothingness is lauded by our nascent magnetism. Nascent because it is Bala, and magnetism because it's attraction, Krishnan. So Balakrishnan is lauding Śivā natarājā. Our own nothingness dances to a rhythmic pattern. Our own nothingness, who is appreciated by our own everythingness in its attractive childlike form, not childish form, but childlike form of Lord Balakrishna, holds apart our mind in its head, Chandra Shekhara, demonstrating how it is different from us and how subtle its structure is. The structure of the mind is very subtle indeed. How subtle the structure is in the form of a thin crescent, not the full moon. That's for flirtations. Indeed, the mind vanishes as the thoughts do in meditation, showcasing our mind's temporary nature and that it doesn't have an existence of its own. Our mind is but a bundle of intellectual thoughts and emotional feelings, shuttling in between a historic past and a mysterious future, making us lose out on the wonderful present, which is all that really exists. Yes, our mind is but a bundle of intellectual thoughts and emotional feelings, shuttling in between a historic past and a mysterious future, making us lose out on the wonderful present, which is all that really, really exists in the first place. So along with the drums, keeping the beat, our own nothingness dances, creating the sound. Ta tat tai. You heard VasanthiMā sing that. Ta tat tai, ta tat tai, ta tat tai, ta tat tai. A rhythmic beat of that thou art, that thou art, that thou art. Ta tat tai, that thou art. Tat tvam asi, tat tvam asi. One of the four Mahavakyas, the others being Prajnanam Brahma, I am Atma Brahma, and Aham Brahmasmi. The second of these is the Tattvam Asi or Ta Tat Tai. With this wonderful feeling, joy, pleasure, and way beyond that, the bliss and ecstasy, let's depart to get back together, hopefully again next week. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Parvati Pataye, Har Har Mahadev.